Hello. This is the last text in our text set that we were reading about the beginning of the year and new schools and making friends and stuff like that. So, this last book is called A Fine, Fine School by Sharon Creech and pictures by Harry Bliss. So, I'm going to go ahead and start. My first question off the bat is why do you think this character's backpack is so huge? That's a very large backpack for a student. Mr. Keene was a principal who loved his school. Every morning he strolled down the hallway and saw the children in their classes. He saw them learning shapes and colors and numbers and letters. He saw them reading and writing and drawing and painting. He saw them making dinosaurs and forts and pyramids. Oh, he would say, aren't these fine children? Aren't these fine teachers? Isn't this a fine, fine school? I want you to look at this illustration to see what is happening in the classroom and see if you can find something that's funny. Near Mr. Keene's school, Tilly lived with her parents and her brother and her dog Beans in a small house next to a big tree. On Mondays and Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, Tilly went off to school. At school, Tilly learned her shapes and colors and numbers and letters. Sometimes when she saw Mr. Keene standing in the hallway, he waved. Aren't these fine children? He said to himself. Aren't these fine teachers? Isn't this a fine, fine school? On the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, Tilly climbed her favorite tree. Help! I'm stuck! And she took Beans on walks and threw him sticks. Let go now, Beans! And she pushed her brother on a swing and tried to teach him how to skip. Be one with the skip, be one with the skip. But on Mondays and Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, Tilly went off to school. Beans and her brother did not like to see her go. Hurry, hurry, hurry home, her brother called. One day, Mr. Keene called all the students and teachers together and said, This is such a fine, fine school. I love this school. Let's have more school. From now on, let's have school on Saturdays, too. The teachers and students did not want to go to school on Saturdays, but no one knew how to tell Mr. Keene that. He was so proud of the children and the teachers, of all the learning they were doing every day. How should the teachers and students tell Mr. Keene that they don't like Saturday school idea? What would you say to him? And so that Saturday, Tilly set off for school. But it's Saturday, what about the swings? Her brother called. The following month, Mr. Keene announced, This is such a fine, fine school. I love this school. Let's have more school. From now on, let's have school on Sundays, too. The teachers and students did not want to go to school on Sundays, but no one knew how to tell Mr. Keene that. He was so proud of the children and the teachers, of all the learning they were doing every day. And so that Sunday, Tilly set off for school. But it's Sunday! What about the skipping? Her brother called. The following month, Mr. Keene called everyone together and said, This is such a fine, fine school. I love this school. Let's have more school. From now on, let's have school on holidays too. On Easter and Ramadan and Thanksgiving and Christmas and Hanukkah. On all the holidays, on every calendar. The teachers and students did not want to go to school on holidays, but no one knew how to tell Mr. Keene that. He was so proud of the children and the teachers, of all the learning they were doing every day. Look at the illustration and see if you can figure out how the students are really feeling about Mr. Keene's ideas. And so on Christmas, Tilly set off for school. But it's Christmas! What about Christmas? Her brother called. The following month, Mr. Keene called everyone together and said, "This is such a fine, fine school. I love this school. Let's have more school. From now on, let's have school in the summer too, all summer long, every single day." "How much we will learn," he said. "We can learn everything. We will learn all about numbers and letters, colors and shapes, the Romans and the Egyptians and the Greeks. We will learn about dinosaurs and castles and everything. We will learn everything." The teachers and students did not want to go to school on Saturdays and Sundays and holidays and all summer long, every single day. But no one knew how to tell Mr. Keene that. He was so proud of the children and the teachers, of all the learning they were doing every single day. Look at this picture, at the illustration, and discuss how everybody is feeling. What emotions are they having right now? And so on the first day of summer, Tilly set off for school. "But it's summer! What about summer?" her brother called. And that day, Tilly went to see Mr. Keene. She stood in his office in front of his desk. "What a fine, fine school this is," Mr. Keene said. "What amazing things everyone is learning." "Yes," Tilly said, "we certainly are learning some amazing things." "A fine, fine school," Mr. Keene said. "But," Tilly said, "not everyone is learning." Who do you think she's talking about when she says not everyone is learning? "What?" Mr. Keene said. He looked very worried. Who isn't learning? Tell me, and I will see that they learn." "My dog Beans hasn't learned how to sit," Tilly said. "And he hasn't learned how to jump over the creek." "Oh," Mr. Keene said. "And my little brother hasn't learned how to swing or skip." "Oh," Mr. Keene said. "Wrong way, Beans." "And I," she said. "But you go to school," Mr. Keene said. "To our fine, fine school." "True," Tilly said, "but I haven't learned how to climb very high in my tree, and I haven't learned how to sit in my tree for a whole hour." "Oh," Mr. Keene said. That day, Mr. Keene walked up and down the halls, looking at all the children and the teachers. Up and down he walked, up and down, up and down. These kids don't even get enough time at home to brush their teeth. The next morning, Mr. Keene called everyone together. The children and the teachers were very worried. Mr. Keene said, "This is a fine, fine school with fine, fine children and fine, fine teachers, but not everyone is learning." The children and teachers were very, very worried. Mr. Keene said, "There are dogs who need to learn how to sit and jump creeks." What did he mean? Was he going to make their dogs come to school? "There are little brothers and sisters who need to learn how to swing and how to skip." What did he mean? Was he going to make their younger brothers and sisters come to school too? The children and teachers were very, very, very worried. "And you, all of you children and teachers, you need to learn how to climb a tree and sit in it for an hour," Mr. Keene said. 20 minutes to go. The children and the teachers were very worried. "And so, from now on, we will..." What do you think he's going to say next? Not have school on Saturdays or Sundays or holidays or in the summer. A huge, enormous, roaring cheer soared up to the ceiling and floated out to the windows so that everyone in the town heard the fine, fine children and the fine, fine teachers shout, "Fine, fine, fine!" What do you think made Mr. Keene change his mind about having school on the weekends and having school on holidays and having school in the summer? And the fine, fine children and the fine, fine teachers lifted Mr. Keene up, and they carried him down the hallway and out the door and through the town, up and down, in and out. And everywhere they went, the people said, "What a fine, fine school with such fine, fine teachers and fine, fine children and a fine, fine principal." How do you feel about that ending? I have 3 questions for you for our last book on beginning of the year, school, and making friends. So, my first question is, what other stories have we read in the past where there are speech bubbles? We see speech bubbles on this beginning page right here where she is climbing up the tree and throwing the stick for her dog. So, those are speech bubbles. So, what other books have we read where there's speech bubbles in them? My second question is, how would you feel if there was school on Saturdays and Sundays? Or if there was school on holidays? Or if there was school all summer long? How would you feel about that? And my last question is that school is a really good thing, but too much of a good thing can be bad sometimes too. So, what is another example of having too much of a good thing being a bad thing? For example, I love the sun, and the sun makes a lot of people happy, but if you have too much sun, what happens to your skin? So, think of another example of having too much of a good thing and how that can be a bad thing. All right, thanks for listening.